So I'm going to start working on the head. I'm going to pull the valves out of her. I got new seals coming in and I'm going to lap in the valves. 37 years, those valves are definitely going to be leaky. You know, it's something you could get away with not doing on a low budget build. But since I got it off and I'm doing new valve seals because I know these are bad, I may as well. It doesn't take that much. You just use a paste. It's called a valve compound, valve grinding compound, and a little suction cup stick. You go back and forth for a few minutes and just do that for each valve. And you know, it's a stopgap solution to a proper rebuild, and it'll help. Anyways, I'll show you what I got going on over here. Okay, we got two different types of valve spring compressors here. A lot of you are probably familiar with this type. This is more of a, if you're not going to pull the cylinder head off the engine, you can do the valves this way. The problem with this is, as you see, the valve can fall down into the engine. So usually what you do is you'll take out the spark plugs, make an adapter, and put compressed air into the cylinder, and that'll hold the valve up so that you can turn this. And the problem is you got to give them a pretty good wrap to loosen up the locks up here. And sometimes even with compressed air that doesn't work. If you do have the head off, this C-clamp here is a universal one. You adjust it up here to the size of your head and your valve. So that's got it just like a C-clamp. It's got a little round part that goes onto the bottom of the valve to hold it in place. You raise up your lever here till you get it reasonably tensioned. This side here sits above the valve. And you can see one lock fell out already. And all you do, like a regular C-clamp, is you crank on this. And these, again, you probably have to give them a little wrap. Don't use a steel hammer because you can mushroom the end of the valve. And then when you go to pull your valve out, if you are pulling your valves out, that mushroomed part can actually cause grooves to go into your valve guides, which is the part of the head in here. It's a push-in piece, similar to a bearing. And you'll end up grooving that, and then you'll have oil going past the valve seals and right into the combustion chamber. Once you got it loose, you just kind of grab on and wiggle these locks around and pull them out. Just like so. They only go in one way. You need two per valve. And then once that's done, you just undo your C-clamp, the spring will come out, the valve seal will be sitting right underneath. And there's your valve seal here. Looks like a little cap. And you want to check, like I said, make sure that's not mushroomed. Over time, the valve itself, just from the lifter, clicking down on it a million times, can mushroom these. And what you'll do is just take a little file and just restore the chamfer. Don't go crazy, but even that's got just a little bit. And you'll feel it if it's mushroomed. And there's your valve. Right, you can see why I want them out. You can see the carbon that's on here. Okay, that's the exhaust valve. They tend to get a little bit more burnt up, and you want to clean those. All right, so I'm just going to take that over to the wire wheel and buzz her up real quick. Okay, so there's your cleaned up valve. If you see right here on this surface, this is the part of the valve that seals into the valve seat. So that's part of the cylinder head. You can see there it's not perfectly smooth by any stretch. Okay, there's quite a little bit groove in that. And for the age of the engine, that's actually not too bad. I've seen a heck of a lot worse. A few things you want to look at is the thickness of the valve, this part. That'll tell you how worn it is. And that seat, that part of the valve, the flat face that sits on the valve seat. So the valve. All right, so there's all my exhaust side done. And You always hear about bent valves. All I do is roll them like this and look at them. If they're going to bend, they're going to bend down in this side here. These all seem to be pretty good shape. I'll get them cleaned up and have a look. Anyways, we're just going to do the intakes now. Same procedure. I just like to keep intake and exhaust separate. Okay, so there's number 6 intake. You can see the size difference, intake and exhaust. The inside wasn't too bad, a little bit of light carbon, nothing ridiculous, but when you flip it over, this is why I like to pull valves. A million years that'll be a diamond on there, it'll be rich. Okay, what happens is the valve seals will go when the piston comes down and it sucks the fuel and air in. It's sucking oil past the valve seal down through the valve body here, and it ends up getting burned into the valve on the next combustion cycle. Alright, so that's going to get cleaned up on the wire wheel. Alright, so there she is, all cleaned up. And remember what I was telling you about the valve seat? And there you'll see there's a very light mark, but it's not an indentation the way it was on the exhaust valve. Okay, and the reason for that is the intake valve gets actually cooled by fuel and air coming in past here every cycle, whereas the exhaust has to pass out hot exhaust, so it gets the brunt of the abuse. Alright, you can see the difference. Okay, if you think that last one was bad, that first one I mean, this one, look at how thick the carbon was on this one. It's almost a ½ an inch of carbon. Chunks were coming out. I'll show you down into the port there. All that was on the valve. Okay, so that's what a couple of bad valve seals will do to your valve. And we'll get those all cleaned up. They're going back in. They don't seem to be any bends in them or anything like that. New valve springs are coming, new valve seals. That'll hopefully address a lot of that. Okay, valves are all out. If you're pulling the engine or doing any kind of a budget rebuild or anything like that, it's definitely something you want to spend the time to do. You've seen how much carbon's on these. This is not 37 years of carbon lumped on there in state. Over the years, chunks break off, go through your engine, and you're blowing them out the tailpipe. Alright, so this is a constant thing that happens. And they do get worse. I've seen much worse. So yeah, if you're going to do any kind of a budget rebuild and you're taking heads off, you can't do this with the heads on, by the way. You obviously have to get the heads off to get the valves out. But if you're pulling the head, I would highly recommend taking the time. Ashton, you missed a spot.